some language about encouraging the camera. The most important thing
Yeah.
is when doing the votes.
I'll go ahead and your handy dandy cheat sheet. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for helping make quorum. We'll confirm that in a few. Welcome to our executive committee meeting. I'd like to note that we are starting the meeting at 6:13 p.m. This is an all virtual meeting, and NVTC staff follow the procedures and guidelines in our electronic participation policy, which I believe we updated last meeting, to give notice to the commission staff and the public about this being all virtual. The meeting is simultaneously being broadcast to the public on YouTube. For those listening on YouTube, if the live stream transmission fails, please contact NVTC staff via email at support@novatransit.org. That's support@novatransit.org. And that will be monitored during the meeting. So if there's any problem, you can contact our staff there, and they will address it. It's been a while on all virtual meetings for all of us. Couple of important reminders. Mute your microphone when you're not speaking to help cut down on background noise. We do have a chat function available, but no public business can be conducted over chat. My view is it's best policy not to be overly active on chat, is how I would describe it. But there are new code requirements, which we discussed last time in executive session for all virtual meetings. The language states, when audiovisual technology is available, a commissioner shall, for purposes of a quorum, be considered absent from any portion of the meeting during which visual communication with the commissioner is voluntarily disconnected or otherwise fails, or during which audio communication involuntarily fails. So as a matter of practice, we encourage you all, I think we have one more than a quorum now. We encourage you to keep your cameras on during the entire executive session if you would. I will try to make executive session efficient, as I often like to. If you do need to step away for a minute, hopefully that's just one of you, you can go ahead and turn off your camera. It's similar to our in-person meetings in that if you need to step out of the room, such as the board administrator is noting that, and any actions recorded in the minutes will reflect when commissioners are present. I will now ask Kate to conduct the roll call for the quorum purposes. She will also announce the staff who are participating virtually. Go ahead, Kate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, we do need commissioners to have their cameras on to be counted present. So hopefully when you turn them on for the vote, you leave them on. That would be wonderful. So please respond here or present when you hear your name called. Matt DiFerranti.
Here.
Kanika Gieri.
Later's here.
I see him, but we're going to come back. We need to get an audio. Walter Alcorn.
Here.
Thank you for turning your camera on as well. Dalia Palchik.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Smedberg.
Present.
Thank you. Dave Snyder.
Here. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you. I'm going to one more time just check Kanika Gieri. We'll have to double check to see if he's having some technical issues. Also on this call, we do have a handful of staff.
Sorry, I had trouble getting to my unmute button.
No, that's okay. Do you have the opportunity to be able to turn on a camera? Or is that not technically possible right
now? Having camera difficulties, my apologies.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. We'll note that for the record. So staff we have with us, we have Rhonda Gilchrist, Alan Fye, Scott Colcorth, Steve McIsaac, Amy Perrin-Seibert, and I'm Kate Mattice. And I believe that is all that we have participating. And actually, I do believe we have one more that I apologize for not mentioning. We have Melissa Walker.
Great. Thank you, Kate. We have, based on the rules that I just described, we have a quorum. We don't have more than a quorum. Given Mr. Aguirre's, you're welcome to listen in, but just for quorum, we will eventually need a camera if you want to add to our quorum, but we have 5. We're okay for now. First item, there are just 3 items for executive committee. We have the meeting summary of the June 6th meeting before us. No action required, but we do want to make sure it's accurate. Any corrections from anyone? Great. I see a no nod from at least one of you, and everybody else without objection, we're going forward. The next item is a review of the NVTC agenda, tonight's meeting, and over to you, Kate, to preview tonight.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So indeed, this evening, we've tried to do our best to keep the meeting actions fairly streamlined. But some of the things I did want to highlight, we do have a wonderful opportunity to do a commendation of Paul Smedberg on his fantastic tenure as the WMATA board chair. I have given him the heads up that we plan on showing a little video that I know he's seen several times, but we're happy to do that. We do not have any public comments. I did want to make sure that you knew that. Beyond our meeting minutes and meeting summary, we do plan on having a single action together for our June meeting and then our June summit. We do have a consent agenda. On that consent agenda, we have 4 items. One is to approve the contract award for state government relations services. The second is accepting the NVTC strategic research roadmap that you've been briefed a couple times on that. To approve resolution 2538, which is it is directing WMATA in the way that they allocate the general fund, additional general fund money that was provided in the budget. This is something that we mechanically need to do because those funds are going directly to WMATA and not to NVTC. This is something we work very closely with both the administration as well as WMATA on. And so that is something that we need to have an agreement on how WMATA treats that money. What this resolution does is it treats the money exactly how the rest of the money that NVTC manages on behalf of the jurisdictions. So that's a consistency thing. It actually keeps things administratively streamlined. And last, the city of Alexandria asked us to send a letter of endorsement for a charging infrastructure grant that can help, among other things, Dash in their electrification. So those are the 4 things on our consent agenda. After that, we do have an update on all of the efforts going on related to identifying long-term dedicated sustainable funding for WMATA and the rest of our transit systems. And so there's really 2 parts to that presentation this evening. One is on our regional bus analysis, which is work that we actually started prior to all of these recent sort of SJ28 and DMV moves efforts. The focus of this was really to look comprehensively across all of our transit systems with the strategic plans that they have, bring them together sort of holistically and look at a regional level. So we're going to be able to pull out a lot of data and a lot of findings that are going to be very helpful for these other efforts, but also other future planning efforts like identifying gaps in between systems and things like that. So Xavier plans on doing a presentation on that work. The reason we want to present it now is because there's all these regional conversations. Accepting that report and approving that report something later this fall. So this is a little bit of a technical presentation. We've not many slides, but we did want to make sure that we briefed everybody. I do believe that we briefed, I think it was the WMATA and legislative committee meeting beforehand, but I know it was at least one of the committee meetings that we briefed this already. And then finally, Alan, and probably a little bit of tag team with me as well, is going to bring the entire commission up to speed on a lot of activity that's been going on with the launch of the SJ28 subcommittee, which happened, the first meeting was this week, and then also the work of DMV Moves, which was really launched in June, but there's a lot of technical work that's happening behind the scenes in advance of its next task force meeting, which is going to be in September. So Alan's going to talk about those things. We do have a closed session for VRE. Because it relates to acquisition of real property. And so those materials have been sent ahead of time. So we will go into closed session. Mechanically, it just basically means we go in a breakout room during the live stream. And when the closed session is done, we'll come back into the full sort of Zoom meeting. And we have that all handled. And finally, in the materials, but we are not planning to talk about them at all, we do have written reports on all the updates from WMATA and legislative and policy committees. We have the DRPT report, and of course we have our financial reports and the executive director newsletter. So those are all in written reports. We're not going to be making really any mention other than go ahead and read the written reports. But other than that, the focus are on the items that I mentioned earlier. So So with that, I'm happy to turn back over to Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kate. Do commissioners have questions about tonight's agenda? In addition to the video, I have 15 minutes of prepared remarks regarding Paul's tenure and just a huge thank you. I think, Paul, you will at some point want us to be succinct on that, but we're, without being too informal, just a huge, I haven't seen the video, and I have not had a chance. My apologies to reach out directly, but I hope you know how grateful each of us on the call is, and in general, for the extraordinary work and leadership you brought. So I'll start with that, and you continue to bring to Metro. And I think all of us as Virginians are plenty glad with your continued leadership. I'll just sort of leave it there. But so that'll happen. And then what if other questions folks may have on the agenda for tonight? If you have any, go ahead. We could use the hand function, but we have a small enough group that any of you, if you have questions on the agenda for tonight, go ahead. Yeah, Dave.
I can't find the raised hand function in this particular program that I'm working with right now, but two quick questions for Steve McIsaac. Will VRE make an initial public presentation before we go into closed session? And then is there an action item after the closed session?
Steve, I'm hoping magically that you will be able to step off of mute. And I don't know if, thank you for doing that. And there you are magically.
There I am. Yeah.
Great.
I assume you can hear me.
Yep, we can.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Snyder, in response to your question, there will be, I envision, I think the order in which Rich plans to proceed is to begin with his report ever so briefly. So there would be that kind of public presentation, but there is no plan to make a public presentation regarding anything related to the closed session topic. The entirety of the materials that we're going to cover in closed session are confined to closed session. There is a proposed resolution that you all should have received with the PowerPoint that Rich sent out. And that resolution asks for one action, which is very straightforward. It is simply to authorize Rich to execute an interim access agreement with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. And the reason for that is because we may find that our relationship with Norfolk Southern is abruptly cut off on September 5th. And if we don't have an interim access agreement in place with VPRA, then we would not be able to run passenger service on September 6th. So that's the one action. The remainder of the resolution gives direction to the chief executive officer regarding certain agreements that we want to negotiate and bring back to the operations board and the commissions for action.
Thank you, Steve. That's very helpful. Dave, I know you may have concerns, and this will be, I think the VRE closed session will be the bulk of our meeting. In looking through the run of show, it looks like it. I think it's very important that there be, and I know Rich is committed to this, that there be a full public process and transparency in advance of the NVTC considering this. But I want to, and the resolution being focused on the interim step is helpful from my perspective. But I also want to give you an opportunity to, and I understand your concern on closed session with respect to, the context that you were asking about, but I want to give you a full chance to respond, and then also give you, Paul, I see your hand raised. So go ahead, Dave.
Sure. I think it would just be helpful if the public was given some greater context to this. I realize that closed sessions are appropriate for certain things, and this may be one of them. But, and then some sort of commitment for a public process I'd like to see made on the record, so that if we get any questions, we can say that the public will have ample opportunity to weigh in with regard to any NVTC actions in the future. And then, and then I think there's a certain commitment about funding, I think, in the resolution, unless that clause has been dropped. I think there was something in there, and again, I think it would be helpful to give some sort of more sort of overall transparency to the whole context of the thing. So just a comment, just a request. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, if I could maybe.
Go ahead.
A couple things. I mean, the largest part of the reason why this is in closed session in its entirety is because much of the substance of it, of the conversation, is subject to a non-disclosure agreement that both VPRA and VERI have with Norfolk Southern. So there's a lot of detail that we simply can't talk about publicly. And in fact, because of the timing of the meetings, we're going to be giving you information that right now VPRA itself, the full authority that is, hasn't heard, because this whole thing is evolving in the way that it is. At any rate, I wonder if it would be satisfactory to say at the outset of the closed session that that we plan to discuss matters relating to the public announcement that VPRA did make about its negotiations with Norfolk Southern to acquire the Manassas line. And that would then lead to the closed session. When we come out of closed session and take the public action that we're proposing, we certainly can say that there will be a full-blown public process regarding the agreements that are mentioned in the resolution, particularly the funding agreement, and that public process will have occurred before any agreement is brought to you for consideration. I will say that the operations board, that was one of the first comments they had about this. They did not want to be presented an agreement sort of out of the blue. They wanted to have it sort of publicly available, so to the extent people want to comment on it, they can. The last thing I will say is, I'm happy to look at the resolution and we can adjust it as the commission deems appropriate, but there is nothing in there about a commitment to a funding agreement. The sole thing, there are two references to it. One is a recital that says VPRA has asked VRE to consider contributing to the acquisition, and then the other one is in the resolve clauses where you would direct the CEO, the VRE CEO, to go negotiate a funding agreement and bring it back to the operations board for recommendation to the commission for approval. So there's no commitment to any kind of funding at this stage.
That's helpful. I was looking for the resolution and the enactment clause. I didn't see the whereas, the recital. I certainly, so that's a piece of it. You mentioned, I think, Steve, a little bit of context at the outset. And I wasn't frankly listening as perfectly as I should while I was multitasking, but Dave, I don't know, and we'll get to you, Paul, because you may want to add context to this, but at least from my perspective, the things that were in the press release, the very succinct press release that I think VRE did, I guess I would love to have some preface that is already disclosable public information from Rich at the start of closed session, because otherwise the public is like, I don't know what this is at all. And I think that's what you said, Steve, but I'm trying to, add context to it, and I don't, I didn't listen perfectly, so I'm not sure whether it's best for you to, given we don't have a lot of time before this, is that something that's reachable that you could work with with Rich to kind of have a little bit of context?
Yeah, no, that's what I was suggesting. I mean, it's not gonna be much more than a few sentences, but it would be a matter of saying, Mr. Chair or commissioners, we're requesting the closed session because we want to address with you certain issues that have arisen out of a public announcement that VPRA made, some weeks ago now concerning their potential acquisition of this Manassas line. And there are certain implications for VRE that we need to talk about in greater detail. And then we just move into closed session.
For me, that works. I don't know, Dave, if that at least addresses some of your concerns.
Yeah.
And then okay. And then on the back end, I'm not able to be quick enough to look at both the enactment clause and the recital. The enactment clause looks okay to me in that it's future items. I understand your concerns though, Dave. This is putting us on a track towards this, but given Steve's and we might ask Rich a question at the end of closed session that provided a little bit of context. I do not know how that would work. I would not want to get into too much detail, given that I think this is a preliminary step, but I feel like it's best to go over to you, Paul. You have thoughts on this.
Yeah, the question for Steve. Steve, PRTC or groups that may focus more of an attention on VRE. What's the feedback been from those groups, from those jurisdictions?
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate you asking that. We presented the identical presentation to PRTC last week because they met on the 11th, and they adopted this resolution as drafted. No changes. And I think there was one abstention, but all the rest voted in the affirmative. And the recital that I think is the recital that mentions the funding is the last recital on page 1. It's the next to the last recital, but it simply says VPRA has requested that in the event the purchase occurs, the commissions contribute to the purchase price. That's all it is. And that, and it says the terms of which would have to be negotiated and brought to the commissions for approval. So it was intended to be, it was just sort of reflecting the fact that the VPRA has made this request and that of course it necessitates a funding agreement that you folks would have to approve.
Does that help, Paul?
Yeah, I was just curious, having been on the VRE board and knowing how those, say, Southern, Northern Virginia jurisdictions view things a lot of times. When I heard about this and read this, I wondered what their reaction would be.
Fair question, born of experience, and that's helpful. I guess for context,
and also, Matt, if I could real quick, is anyone else having difficulty hearing Steve? I can hear everyone else. Steve, your sounds a little muffled to me on my end.
Okay,
I will try to speak up. Maybe I'm just not yelling enough.
It is a little bit better, Steve. You are a little far away from your microphone, I think.
That must be what it is. Yeah. All right. I will try to do better. I
do want to note that when Steve was in Arlington, whenever he spoke, he was yelling and screaming. Oh, sorry. That's no. So
I was just trying to fit in.
Well said. All right. So I think for context for all of you, and this is a public meeting, but I do think from Kate and Rich, the discussion, and we should have as full discussion as appropriate. The discussion at PRTC was, I think, an hour or hour and 20 minutes. Just for context, not, we should raise all issues that are appropriate. I do think one of the key balances that we're trying to address is that this is a preliminary effort, but it is headed in a direction where there would be, the commission would be seriously considering in September investment. And so it's appropriate in the recital that Steve mentioned, as well as in the enactment clause, that at least it's mentioned, and there will be, I believe, questions from there. But unless there are other hands or concerns or questions, I feel like we've at least done a thorough preview of that closed session, which I think will be the bulk of tonight's meeting. And I will just go on to say the only other item that looked to me as though at least it's worth considering raising at this stage is the contract award for state government relations services. And if you haven't read the packet, there was some additional process because we received one application, and that additional process seems appropriate to me. So, you know, Amy is on the call. It is public, of course, but she has sort of kindly volunteered to step off our executive committee if there's more discussion. I am certainly open if anyone raises a hand or has thoughts. I think it's simultaneously the case that we want to be good stewards, and it's fair to say that this past session, many of us had strong assessments of the leadership that Amy and her company brought to our work. So I will not further, I want to give an opportunity should anyone have questions on that item, because it's the only one that, other than, I think, the you know, VRE, that's sort of the one that rises up. The resolution, I think, Paul, you're probably well aware of. As I understand it, there was, you know, the resolution simply allows us to codify and make operational the work that happened in the legislative session, unless Kate, you or Amy want to correct me. That's sort of what we got. So mindful that we have one more item, and we do want to get on time and probably want to see if we can have a 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever we can get before the original item. Over to you for item 3, Kate, which is administrative items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, just a reminder, so we are sitting here in the middle of July. We do not have an August meeting, and this year alone, September's meeting is our documentary premiere and celebration, which is coming together on September 5th. So we don't have another commission meeting actually until October. We do have several committee meetings already scheduled in September. We actually have I think most of the committees are actually right around the same date. And so all that information's already gone out. We are going to be starting to work on our annual budget because that's something we typically bring to this body by December for a January enactment. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at really closely is our work plan, the scope of efforts that we have going on, including whether we see any analytical products or research products. If you think about our research strategic plan, it's our work plan is where we want to flesh out and work through what might be happening in the future. So just heads up that we're going to be working through at the staff level and working with your jurisdictional staff, and obviously with the executive committee here about any of those things. They've not started yet. It's just a sort of a heads up. I know I'll be having my annual performance review. Mr. DiFerranti is going to be working through that. We will have an executive committee on September 5th at Marymount University. We're going to have a special room for that. It's a public meeting, but it's going to be in advance of our celebration that evening. Just a lot of it is just to keep things moving forward and make sure we have everything taken care of. And again, our 60th anniversary is at 6 p.m. At Marymount University. We have one U.S. Senator and 2 members of Congress already RSVP'd to be there. We're working on a couple others. And we have, I think, close to 90 or 100 RSVPs already. So it really will be a special evening of former and current commissioners, as well as other friends and family of NVTC. And again, just for the record, the costs associated with this have been through sponsorships that we've received and not through NVTC funding. So we're really excited for that event. So that is what I have, Mr. Chair.
Great. Any questions? Want to provide space, but not dilly-dally. Any questions for Kate? Great. Thank you for helping make quorum for this. We will see you, unless there's objection, we'll see you at 7.
With a new Zoom link. There's a unique Zoom link for at 7 o'clock. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
See you
you.
Great.
shortly. Thank you.
Nice job, Matt.